Thank you so much for being with us here at the launch of Reginald Bulled's memoir, Faith, Love, and the Railroad. So before I pass it on, I'm just going to share the preface with you to start off the conversation. A group of about 20 men, they have to be men, for they live and breathe and function as men, sit around a small campfire deep in a Thai jungle. Here, they talk about the last 3.5 years that they survived as slaves of the Japanese Imperial Army. Their feet bear the scars of having been torn apart by bamboo thorns. Their flesh is marked with tropical ulcers. Some remain raw and gaping. Their bodies are shriveled and lifeless, like old men whose muscles have long since atrophied and died. Their thighs and pelvis bones stick out sharply with red patches, the result of endless nights of lost battles with bedbugs. Rib cages stand out clearly. Chests slope inwards to the hollows of their throats and collarbones. Thin arms hang like sticks with huge hands weighing down the ends. Heads are shrunken onto skulls with matted and lifeless hair. On their faces, the few teeth they still have stand out abnormally large. They sit with faintly glowing eyes, the only sign of the determination and refusal to bow to the torture, starvation, beatings, and inhumane working conditions of the past years. These near-death bodies are the result of what the Japanese Imperial Army and their captured Korean forces did to men who were imprisoned in the South Pacific. More than half of these men died, hastily buried in unmarked graves along the railway track. The men are hungry, lacking nutritious food and medical supplies, yet finally they are free men. The air between them is punctuated with laughter as they retell jokes that have been repeated endlessly to keep the spirits up during those nightmarish years. One man speaks. "It will be just my luck to get home, walk out of the railway station, and be knocked down and killed by a man on a bicycle." Such was the hopeless philosophy of men who had stared death directly in the eye and won. After a brief silence, another man muses, "You just wait until we get home and tell them what happened during our incarceration." Forlornly, a response, "No, the full story will never be told. They will never be able to realize the depth of depravity men could stoop to against other men. They will think you are stretching the truth out for sympathy." How true those words were to become. More than 90,000 men died building the railway for the Japanese Imperial Army during the Second World War in Asia. Yet the full story of those years remain untold, untaught, and unrecognized. In response to the many urgings of my family, and especially those of my grandsons, here is my story. To this day, I bear physical and mental scars and have nightmares caused by those years. But with God as my witness, it is the truth.
It dates back to a few years ago when I received a call, an email, I think, from Heather's husband, and asking if Alpha is interested in publish a memoir of ex-prisoner of war. And we were excited, extremely excited, even without knowing how we're going to handle this, because it's the first time that we ever think about publishing a book, but I did not even consider that. We had a meeting with Mr. Bulled immediately, and after reading his draft, his work, it is very, very hard for me to continuing on with the clear or rational mind that, okay, this is very hard, I don't know how to publish a book, but we just say, yes, we gotta publish this book, because this is so important. Not only it is a closure to Mr. Bulled, who was then close to 90. I remember I spent his 90th birthday with him. At that time, he has experienced so much, and he has hidden all this in his heart for so long that this story has to be told. But it is not just that we have to tell his story. We're grateful for his courage to retell it. But I also think, that team of Alpha also think that it is a good chance for our young generation to not just understand the history, but also learn the positive attitude, the faith, and the love that Mr. Bulled exemplified in this memoir. Despite all his sufferings, which you will read more in his memoir, but he's still telling us, as long as we have faith, and as long as we still treat others with love, then you are okay, you will survive. And this helped me to go through a lot of questions that I have with the brutality of the Japanese Imperial Army. Yes, they have done extremely wrong things, but I think as the victim, as a survivor, and as people who are thinking back, then what are the attitudes that we have in order to face the history? I thank Mr. Bulled for his courage and for his willingness to recount his memory, and so that all of us can understand his love, his faith, and learn from him. And I also thank his family members for their patience. It took us 3 years to finish this book. It is not easy. But we try to add on other things that we hope the readers, young readers, can understand better about his suffering. So we add a historical background to this book. So we provide a broader context, historical context, so people know more about the invasion of Japan, not just in China, Korea, but also the entire Asia. So apart from gratitude, I don't know what else would I say. I hope you all will have a chance to read this book and share this book with many others. And we hope that this book will be an important educational tool for the young people. We hope that all the school boards, libraries will have a copy of this book so that more people will understand from and learn from the story of a young man and who has experienced so much and who still endure his faith and his love. So I thank you, Mr. Bulled. Thank you. And he may not be able to listen because he has a hearing problem as myself. So, but anyway, he knows that we all thank him for whatever he has done. Okay, thank you very much.
Good morning. This is an exciting day for our family and a proud day for my father. It's been a long and sometimes difficult journey for him, but it's a wonderful thing for him at 93 to see his memoir published. We hope that his story inspires people and informs them of the atrocities that were forced on these people who suffered in the prison camps. But the most important thing is we want people to realize that his faith is what carried him through. This has been a long, long journey. It started about 25 years ago when his grandchildren asked him, "What happened during the war, Grandpa?" When Philip and I grew up, Dad couldn't talk about the things that he faced during the war. It was just too painful for him. We just knew that he, twice a year at least, would come home from work with a bout of malaria. And night after night, he would cry out in the middle of the night with nightmares. But he could never talk about it to us. Then when his grandsons reached their teens, they started asking him, and slowly he was able to start talking to them. And we encouraged him at that point to write his story out. The first draft of the story is actually handwritten, but that became very onerous. And since my dad was a printer by trade and was able to type, we bought him a computer. Actually, no, we bought him a typewriter first. And he started typing his story. But then every time he would read a page, he would realize he had either left something out or there was something he wanted to change. And so that whole page would have to be scrapped and back to the beginning again. So we bought him a computer. And that went fairly well. We got lots of calls. "I saved my draft last night and I got in this morning and it's not there anymore." I lost track of how many times we raced over to find the file just where it should be. Then just about 4 4 years ago, my husband, who was a principal, was reading one of the educational magazines and saw a little article that Alpha was having a conference. And he got in touch with Flora and Dr. Wong, and that was the beginning of our story. It's been a really long and sometimes very painful journey, but I think it's, in the end, has been a very cathartic journey for my dad. Now I would just like to thank those who have helped us over the last few years. Especially I would like to thank Dr. Wong and Flora for initiating this journey and for walking with us over the last couple of years. Thank you so much for your help and your presence with us. I have a special thank you to Sarah. Sarah has worked closely with my dad and I over the last couple of years, and she has been very supportive and caring, as my father sometimes struggled with very bad memories. Thank you, Sarah. I want to thank Andrew, Michelle, and Craig and Heidi for your support during these last few years. My son Craig designed the cover for his grandpa's book. Thank you, Craig, for your creativity, and thank you for dealing very patiently with all the changes that we made. Andrew has been our go-to guy for computer issues, and believe me, there have been a few, including losing Word altogether at one point. So thank you, Andrew and Craig, for your help. Finally, I just want to express our appreciation to all of you who are here today to support us and to support my dad in his journey. Thank you so much.
I'd like to start out by thanking you for extending to me the privilege of coming here today to be here at the official launch of my father's book. And it's been a real pleasure to meet Sarah and Flora and Dr. Wong. These are names that all I have seen in the past are names on emails because I live on the West Coast, and I haven't even gotten to meet them until this morning, so it's been a real pleasure to meet the people that have enabled this project that we're celebrating the launch of today. Dad's book covers the 3.5 years that he spent in a Japanese prisoner of war camp. But what it doesn't cover is the subsequent lifetime of physical and mental suffering that covers the time from liberation until today. Ex-POWs were not able to talk about their experiences for two reasons. First, the governments had imposed gag orders on the ex-POWs so as not to prejudice the war crimes trials that were happening for the years immediately following the war. And secondly, it was very, very difficult for the survivors to recall the pain and suffering from the time of their incarceration and their forced slavery. Since the end of the war, as Heather's mentioned, Dad has had to endure bouts of malaria at least twice a year, when the weather changed to winter in the fall, and again when it changed from winter in the spring. I remember many years coming home from school to find Dad in bed wrapped up in blankets. And he'd still be shivering from the fevers of the malaria. Dad has also had to deal with a lifetime and constant bouts of depression and continuous nightmares, as he has relived the horrors of his experiences over and over in both his sleep and his waking hours. These are things that never, ever will leave him. Just a couple of months ago, Dad told me, I phone Dad every Sunday afternoon. It's a time I really look forward to. But Dad told me that he had been in delirium for 2 or 3 days, and that in his mind he was back in the jungle. So the pain continues even to this day, 69 years later. So the question can be asked, how does a man like this live to be 93 years old? And Dad was 93 years old last Thursday, so I got to celebrate his birthday with him. That was a pleasure as well. But the answer to the question is twofold. It's first and foremost is because my father has a deep faith in the power and love of his Savior God to hold him and to deliver him from evil. Dad took that faith with him to the war. It is that faith that brought him home from the war. And it is that faith that has held him through the last 69 years since he returned home. The second is the love of a good woman. My mom stood beside Dad and helped him and supported in both his life and his faith. She also had the difficult task of keeping him in line. Mom went home to be with the Lord in 2002. And I know Dad is looking forward to that day when they will be reunited again in heaven. And when I do, I'm sure the Mom will be waiting there with a roast beef dinner and a rice pudding, just as she did for so many years when they were here on earth together. I don't understand why a guy that lived on rice for 3.5 years loves rice pudding. Okay, but that is it. That was our Sunday dessert every Sunday as long as I could remember. In closing, I would like to thank New Horizons Tower and Dovercourt Baptist Church for extending the use of their facilities here today so that we can have this celebration. And I would like to thank the Alpha organization for making this day possible, for publishing Dad's book, and for the good work that they do in maintaining the memories, the things that happened during that wartime period. And it is my prayer that their work will help our fellow man live in peace and in harmony with each other. But, it's Dad's faith has been a very strong influence in my life over the years. And it is a real honor to be with him today and be beside him as his book is launched. So Dad, it's your turn to play with the microphone.
I've been about a football match. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen and friends. When I first started to write my memoirs, it was done to relieve the pressure of this event here. I would also like to thank my grandson, Craig, for producing the lovely cover for my book. Thank you for coming. May God bless each one of you.
Thank you so much, Reg. We're so happy to be here together.
Thank you. They say never follow children or war heroes, so I'm next. Thanks to Alpha for inviting me and also to the Bulled family. As an educator for many, many, many years, I've always had a keen interest in global awareness, cultural issues, and social citizenship and responsibility. And as many of you know, curriculum and what we teach is political. It changes under governments, depending on what their agenda is. And what we teach is what we believe. And so that's why I'm so thrilled to have Mr. Bulled's book as an educational resource for our students today. I immigrated to Canada many years ago, and when I was taking high school history, it was military history with no personal story at all attached. The victims were rarely mentioned other than numbers, and the pain and suffering of that they went through and that the families at home went through were just not even mentioned. And so when I started teaching, there was a curriculum change and a social attitude changed and a political change that we need to start looking at the oppressors, the victims, and the personal cost to the people involved. And it's only through education that we can learn to prevent future. When I was asked to read the draft of Mr. Bulled's book, I was deeply moved and touched. One of my own uncles, my mother's brother, was killed in Burma during the war and is buried there. I never met him. He was 21 years old. But until I read the draft of Mr. Bulled's book, he was just a casualty of war. I never realized what he must have gone through in those years when he was fighting in Burma. The heat, the disease, the hunger. It just became so poignant for me to read that draft and to hear unspoken in the pages a tremendous courage, determination, and faith. And Mr. Bulled and many other Canadian soldiers and soldiers all over the world did that so we can be sitting here today free people. And I think this is a story that our students need to hear. They need to hear the cost of war so that when they're in the position of making decisions about war, they know the cost. They know exactly what we're getting into. So I'd like to thank Mr. Bulled for writing this memoir. And I'd also like to thank him for his service, not just to Canada, but to the global community. And I'd like to thank Alpha for making our students more socially aware and better Canadian citizens.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Mr. Bulled, despite my very, very busy schedule, some of you do know that I used to work 16 hours a day. My day never ended before 4 o'clock in the morning. But when I got Mr. Bulled's book, I can't help reading it through from cover to cover. And it is how captivating his life story was. And it was very inspirational. I got moved. I learned a lot through his suffering. Through his works, I learned about human nature. I learned how human spirit could overcome so many adversities, suffering, torture, pain, emotion, with his firm belief and his love. He overcame all of these difficult times. This is not only a book that his children, his grandchildren should read. This is a book all of us, particularly the students in schools and universities, should really learn from. Such a tragic personal story, but it is inspirational, making us not to forget those who suffer during those wars and warn us not to repeat those history. Patricia was right when we look at numbers, they're just figures. But multiply this personal suffering millions of times. What has the war brought to this world? Toronto Alpha Association for Learning and Preserving the History of World War II in Asia is an organization that was established since 1997 with the objective of bringing the facts and the memories of the war in Asia to the school system in Canada and around the world. It's a very simple mission, is to bring about peace and reconciliation through the suffering of our pioneers, those who bravely fought on our behalf So our work is to work together with the school boards, the schools themselves, and teachers and educators, so that our future generations learn not only from the war in Europe, but also the war in Asia as well. A few years ago, when Mr. Bulled's son-in-law learned about the conference that we organized in 2010 for educators and students in Toronto, that was the world's first conference on this war, specifically targeting educators. So our work has been continuing for a number of years, and we work closely with educators, school board schools, and so that our future generation, our younger generation, can learn about this. I am also very glad to see Mr. Bulled's great-grandchild wanting to attend this event, rushing to come to this world only 12 days ago. So he's here among us, and Mr. Bulled, congratulations. So I hope that all of us would learn from Mr. Bulled's book, and we are going to promote this in the school boards and the schools, and also to the young people in Canada and beyond. And we hope that this book would bring us hope and peace in the future. Thank you, Mr. Bulled, and thank you, Philip and Heather, and all your loving relatives who are in attendance today. And I also want to thank all the seniors who are from Horizon Towers who come down and listen to Mr. Bulled and Toronto Alpha. And I want to thank you very, very much. And I want to thank you because I am in the not business, I am in the volunteer work of bringing services to the seniors. So your presence here today means a lot to me. Thank you very much.
I just got it, and I just glanced through the cover, and immediately I think that I can relate strongly with your story, because even though I'm 10 years junior to you, I was in the Korean War as a veteran, and I went through many experiences what the war can do to human society and people. So I will read it, and I will meditate on it, and I will pass along this book to my children. And you gave me some courage that maybe I should write a book too.
Hi, I'm Craig, Mr. Bulled's grandson. As a child, especially as a boy growing up, you play war. And when we were growing up, my other cousin Todd, as well as my brother Andrew, we would play war and not really know the depths of what we were doing, and just knowing that our grandfather had medals in a drawer somewhere tucked away, and so he must be a hero. As he opened up and started talking to us about his experience, I think we had a completely different look on what war was, and totally understood that what we were doing wasn't anything like what actually happened. And as my grandfather told his story to us, not only did it open our eyes and open our hearts, but allowed us to understand how much of a hero my grandfather really was. Not because of the things he did in the war, but because of how courageous he was with his faith and with his love. And so, Grandfather, Gramps, I just wanted to say thank you so much for everything you've taught me through this, through your original writings in your book, and through being able to read this. I am so thankful that you allowed me to be part of your project, and you've always been my hero.